What we're going to do today is talk about external letters, arm's length letters, because they're a pain and they're a problem. And then we're going, and that my prepared remarks are about 15 minutes or so. And then we'll, or maybe a little longer. And then we'll sit and just chat about our experiences with it. We have a wealth of experience in the room about how this is, what we've seen over the years, okay? And the best way to put it into perspective is they're pesky and they're a pain. I met with somebody last week, and this was clearly going to be a major barrier. Now, this actually isn't from our committee, but I would submit to you from people who are on the committee or have been on the committee. These are, I made these red because these are definitely problems we see. But this is professional, so external referee letters, which we'll discuss, national, international reputation. These two things are actually coupled. Professional contributions, scholarship of teaching, teaching documentation, and problematic CVs, okay? But by far the things that are creating the largest barriers for our faculty are these two, and this is from another institution, and you can see it's a common problem. So, lions and tigers and bears, oh my, we have to get ourselves some letters. What are they? Why? And how do I go about getting them? Okay, so what is it? It's a person whose impartiality cannot be doubted. Well, anybody can be doubted, but we hope not. They are not normally expected to include such things as relatives, close personal friends, clients, current or former colleagues, former thesis advisors, research supervisors, grant co-authors, or co-holders, co-authors. Okay, so that's the first thing. This person should be a respected scientist or academic or teacher, depending on which category you are working in, and is a closely related area and is above you in rank. So I've seen them where assistant professor is going up for associate professor and all the letters are coming from other assistant professors. That sort of is not helpful. Should not be a mentor, former colleague, prior collaborator, now a co-author. All of these are biased. These are people that if you get promoted, benefits them some way, somehow. Particularly those who were your mentor, because if you do well, that reflects positively on them. Submitting only referees who have prior relationships suggests that the candidate has no impact on the field. In other words, if you can't find these people, what kind of reputation impact have you had? This comes from another famous university, and what constitutes an arm's length relationship? You did not train at the same institution. We see this all the time. We were so glad when you were a fellow or a resident at our place, okay? Those many years ago. Well, I really enjoyed what you worked in my lab. That was so wonderful. Wrong. Funded grants, this is a problem because this is, there's a business relationship, and getting you promoted might actually benefit the grant. Now, the exception could be very large consortia where you're just a cog in the wheel. You've not published together again or greater than 5 years ago. I sort of use NIH guidelines for conflicts of interest for the most part, and then clearly not a personal friend. This is what our green sheets say. Must come from people whose ability to provide an objective evaluation of the academic performance and reputation of the candidate is not put into question by prior associations. Okay? Is there something hinky going on here? And it happens all the time. We get the letters in the dean's office and we read that opening paragraph about how this person knows the person, and there's just all these warning signs that come out. Now, this is in part and parcel to the whole notion of professional recognition. Exemplary performance must be demonstrated. So remember, to get promoted, you have to develop excellence in one area or more. So what's your area of excellence? To get promoted to full professor, you really need to be doing more than that, okay? Or within that area, you've really come to the top. And so just continued service and performance at rank is not by itself constitute grounds for promotion. And so, to professor particularly, but even at the assistant to associate jump. Okay, so just showing up for work is not good enough. And we're working on a document to give examples of what we mean by that. This is a major problem. Demonstration of national, international prominence in the discipline. For professor, national, regional prominence as a associate professor. This is a big problem for our faculty. And it's not just our faculty. We are having a meeting of the New England Network of Faculty Affairs folks in the fall down in Northeastern, where we'll be discussing the whole promotion issues. And that grew out of a conversation this spring when Amelia Benjamin from BU got up and said, our clinical scholars, I don't see how they're ever going to get promoted. They're so busy, and I said, well, some of our educating scholars are in the same kind of boat, or so they say. And so we're going to be talking about that. And it's not just us that is having problems with this, okay? Many other institutions are. So publications, presentations, we really look at this hard, presentations outside of Vermont. So if you're giving a talk somewhere else, and the way I look at that is if I invite young Dr. Surratt here to come and give a talk at my institution in Nevada, I'm paying his airfare, I'm paying his hotel, I'm paying his honorarium and other legal fees. And I wouldn't do that if I didn't think he was pretty good. And so to me, those are real bona fide evidence of your reputation. Okay. So again, the top of the list, I don't know, would you agree with that? In terms of the biggest problems are these two?
Yeah, I mean, and they're intertwined.
Yeah, hard to separate.
Can I ask if this is more specific for clinical track pathway than it is for basic sciences?
No.
Because my experience was that in the basic sciences, it was much less of a problem.
It's usually less of a problem, but I just did a review for another 2 prestigious institutions, really prestigious East Coast institutions. And the one in particular had really very little evidence of a national reputation. And the other one was kind of So, and I've just been asked to do 2 more. One who I know, and I know that will be fine. The other one is somebody I've never heard of before on an educating scholar track.
But then what kind of a problem is this? The candidate doesn't have it? Is that the problem? In which case?
Sometimes they do, and they've done such a bad job here that they just never captured it. Okay, so it's a matter of documentation. That's usually not the problem, but sometimes. Okay. And they can't get out of town, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I was rummaging around last night in a panic, and I came across a couple of examples from other institutions. So this was excerpted from somebody on the promotions committee. So-and-so has a strong international reputation for research in an emerging and interdisciplinary field. His 7 letters from outside evaluators indicate strong support. He has generated strong grant support. He has a record of professional university service. He also carries a heavy teaching load and is an excellent teacher, as indicated by student evaluations and department head comments. Okay, now, some of this can be finessed, right? But that is very hard to finesse, okay? Getting 7 strong letters. And I've seen it time and time again in my own case and in other cases. These letters become very important. And if it's a gray zone promotion, the letters really become important because people will dive into those. And I can see some nodding heads, so I know there's some agreement. Now here's another one. These were letters from Texas A&M, Oklahoma State, University of Washington, Drexel. While teaching and service seem to be adequate for this stage of the academic career, I do not see the depth of work, either in research, publication, presentations, or in professional practice, to merit the granting of tenure. The tenure package lacks direction and focus. How do you think a comment like that from an external letter from one of these well-known institutions is going to play in a promotions committee?
Just the way it should.
Not good. Okay. Even, as I found in one blog, even just a hint of a problem or a lack of enthusiastic endorsement in that last paragraph. Now here's one that I modified, and it's just sort of from recollection, where one of our clinical scholars was sent out. I don't remember who. It's been I think about 2 years ago. I don't remember where the person's letter came from, but it said, and I'm paraphrasing, we have examples of similar physicians who practice in the community, and that was sort of in the last sentence or so of the letter. Okay. So that's not exactly what I would call the kind of letter that's going to be helpful. And a letter like that, this guy, it was more eloquently pitched than this, but it was done in a way that, you could tell that they were not enthusiastic, although they did not say, I don't support it. They never said they supported it, and this was basically the conclusion. All right, so outside letters. Find out how many you need, and I'll talk about that in a second. Ask peers if it's okay. Now, some people disagree with me on this, but it doesn't actually say we can't. And I'll talk about that a little bit more.
If what's okay?
If it's okay to solicit the letters, depending on how you did it. You have to come up. Now, most people have to come up with their own lists. I mean, occasionally, I suppose somebody will come up with lists for you, but I doubt it. It's highly recommended you get them from good institutions, only because I've watched how that plays out. This person, and I'll quote something from her in a few minutes, in this blog of hers, it's called The Professor Is In blog. It's kind of an interesting one, and she really went off on the fact that you've got to get it from big institutions if you can. It's nice to be from all over the place instead of just from Dartmouth, say. And because they don't know famous faculty like you do in your discipline, but they do know famous places, and they look to see what the title and rank of the person is. Okay? They do get that. And her point was, you want to get men to write these letters, which I was a little bit stunned by. But her point in the end was you want to get promoted. So let's not get into all the gender equality stuff. Let's get you promoted, I think was her pitch. I'm just paraphrasing what she said. So how many letters? So those of you on the tenure track out there in video land, you're going to need 5 letters. 5. No, not 4, not 3, 5. Now, it used to be we had 5 for everybody else. And I think my predecessor organize this deal, and we've got it down from 5 to 3. But the deal is they have to be true arm's length. So we enforce that pretty well, because I don't want to have to go back to telling everybody they got to get 5. All right. No 5 letters, no promotion. No 3 letters, no promotion. That's how that is. And so you have to plan that in plenty of time. Typically, I get about 2 months from the time the ask is before the letter's due. I'll have to look at these latest 2 that I've been asked to write. So you first, that helps. You know, I hate the, well, yeah, you have to, because that's kind of what we're about. You yourself have to get famous somehow. If for no other reason, you need these pesky letters. Now, how do you go about that? Well, you can join committees, editorial boards, write book chapters, become an expert in something or other, develop a national peer network, lecture out of town, lecture for so-and-so, and on and on. You need to find people with similar interests to what you have. You need to focus on prominent researchers in your field. Editors are a good place to go. I mean, editors sometimes will ask you to do things, so you say, well, quid pro quo, baby. I'll do that, but I need a letter next spring. You know, make a deal. Committee chairs. This is where being involved in your national society can be very helpful. The committee chair that on the panel that you sit on. Department chairs. This is really gold. I mean, particularly going up for full professor, if you can make friends with somebody who's a chairman at another institution, because then they can write a letter that's coming from a chair of a department. Whoa, that's heavy. Look for full professors. Associates, sort of okay, but concentrate on full professors. And just don't bother with these guys. None of these matter. They're a waste of time, unless they're there to illustrate or explain something. How do I get this? You have to get active in conference. This is from Karen Kelsey, the Doctor is In blog. Be active in conferences and other public events. Now, this is her advice, and she has quite the street cred, but I totally concur with it. You're going to have to get active in conferences and other public events on and off campus. Here's a good one. When somebody visits, a visiting professor, to give a talk, meet with them, go out to dinner, go have a beer. Make sure you get an opportunity to present your work to them. If you're on a clinical track, then talk to them about a case. You've got a case that you can't figure out. Or teaching, talk to them about some aspect of teaching that you're curious about, or what is their opinion about. Take a leadership role, both in your own unit, in your society. Our faculty in general are not keen to take leadership roles. We will be developing materials for leadership training. Avail yourself of that. Junior scholars, you know, in these societies, becoming a treasurer or secretary, or this is always a good one, some committee that doesn't have a large burden, you get to meet some other people from around the country. Okay. So the bottom line is you've got to get out of town, because if you don't hit the road, you want to hit the road and not the wall. I kind of like that. That was cute. You're going to have to get out of town. I don't see any way around it. And I've had, I don't know how many faculty talk to me about the fact that, well, you know, I got all this clinical stuff I got to do, or I got all these classes I have to teach, or I'm doing this research, or I had one faculty member tell me recently, I'm shy. Well, at least they're being honest. I'm shy. So there are a lot of, the Doctors In blog, for instance, has advice about what you need to do at conferences. I can certainly recall when I was younger, I'm shy too. I'm a very shy, retiring person. I have a hard time making friends.
I agree with that, just not the shy part.
Okay. But I remember going to a meeting, and it was a dinner thingy, and I'm sitting at this table with people I didn't know, and I decided, well, all right, I'm going to make friends with so-and-so, this older guy across the way. And turned out he was actually quite well known, and I've been chatting with him ever since. So you just pick one person that looks reasonably friendly, and you start to make friends with them, talk to them, okay? Get to know people. It is imperative that candidates understand the stakes and the craft and craft the initial list of possible names with the utmost care and deliberation. It is really important. This is her, Dr. Kelsey again. You need to really spend a lot of time with that list. Now, if you need 3, let's say you need 3 letters, how many people should be on your list?
8.
Good number. If you need 5 letters, how many?
Probably 10 to 12.
What did I hear?
I said at least 10.
At least 10. Why?
Might I write them?
Yeah. Now, I've just been asked within 2 days to write 2 letters for people. Now, I got a lot to do. Now, the one person I know pretty well, I would count him as a friend, all right? Not a personal friend, but just, a colleague. I'm definitely going to write his. The other person I don't know, I don't think, maybe I will, maybe I won't.
The other thing is, though, is when you get the letters back, if your chair's doing their job, they gotta look at the letters and decide which ones they're gonna pass forward. And if you don't get enough letters back, there have to be a certain number of letters. If there's only a couple of really good ones and then one that's so-so, that's a bind. And then if there's no time, that so-so letter's gonna go forward.
Uh-oh, Dr. Lowe is having a
I'm
problem.
sorry,
But, I
I'm
don't-
sorry, the chair in no circumstance
Should
should
be doing
screen the
that.
letters.
No way. If I
No
find out that
circumstance.
my letter doesn't go because they don't like it, I'll be really annoyed.
So I just did one for one of these prestigious East Coast, and what they do is interesting. The faculty member puts up 10 names. This committee meets to decide whether the faculty person stands a chance of getting promoted or not. Their bar is probably reasonably low. And then they have to come up with another 20 names, and they send out they send out some number of requests. And the letters do not go back to the chair, they go to the committee. And I think one of our problems to deal with this the letters should not be going to the chair. Although the chair is who asks. So, I don't know.
The chair or whoever's designated by the chair to be responsible for the
Right,
review.
so currently that's how it happens, but this
Letters
is,
get filtered at this point.
I don't know, I don't know what goes on.
I-
Now, the
I'll
other
go back to
thing,
this, because I'm a little bit interested in this additional committee decision about letters.
yeah,
We'll come back to that.
okay. Now, so you have to have reliable people. So my approach has always been, when I was doing this, is I would meet somebody at a national meeting, somebody who was senior, somebody who I had at least knew or had just become new personal best friends with. And I would say, I'm coming up for promotion next year. Would it be okay that I put your name down? Now that is really important conversation, because then they get this request, they'll most of the time will remember and say, oh yeah, I promised this nice young person I would write a letter. Now, as long as they meet the other standards of an arm's length letter, I don't see that as a problem, because I'm going to tell you that we are going to come shortly to a point in time when we're going to have a hell of a time getting these letters. It is a lot of work to write these letters, a boatload of work. And that's why when we tell you to get 6 and 8 and 10 and 12 names, we're not kidding, okay? Because you may have to run the whole list to get 3 or 5 letters.
What's the difference between an acquaintanceship and a friendly, professional relationship?
I would say an
Because in one of
Yeah.
your other slides, it seemed as though it's way, way, way separate from you, like you've barely met them before.
Right, or in my case, the one that I've just been asked, I have never met the person.
Right, and I do
Actually,
this
the
too.
last two I've done, I've never met them at
But
all.
I've done letters for people that I've never met before, I've done letters for people that I have met before,
Yep.
I've done letters for people that I worked on committees with
Right.
in a professional way, but it's professional.
Yeah, so those are
Nonetheless-
all acceptable. So they go from you don't know them to where you've met them twice, which is what I would consider an acquaintance, to somebody I know fairly well because I've worked on a committee with them. You know, we had a beer or two and a couple of laughs of some sort. And all those are okay because you got to look at it this way. If you get promoted or don't get promoted, does that really matter to them? And you see all these types of folks we've just discussed, it doesn't matter whether you get promoted to, you know. They have no skin in the game. While strangers can and often do write excellent evaluations, and I have, the warmth and enthusiasm that comes from an acquaintanceship is helpful, okay? Oh yeah, I know Charlie, you know, instead of Charles, it's Charlie, you know, that kind of thing. So what happens is you will be submitting a list of names to the chair. The chair will send your CV, which will be in our new spanking brand new format, which I hope to have the next version of out this week. And then we send the form, and this is now a good time for you to look at the form. So this was originally developed in the Department of Medicine, and we've now slowly tweaked it. And it actually is a form that we ask the reviewer to fill in, which they do sort of. And then, so we can kind of gauge the letter, okay? It's another way of tweaking the reviewer to, you know, like, what's the issue here? And notice that are they if obviously they click the first three, they're disqualified. So you want them to be none of the above. And then knowledge is based on their CV, of course, is somebody who's truly arm's length, or you don't know them, scientific presentation, and so forth. And we can kind of gauge how they've been involved with it. Now you then sit back and wait and wait and wait. Now think about the time schedule. Those requests for letters go out when? For our department.
For promotion,
Yeah.
it must go out over the kind of late summer, maybe.
Thank you. Now what are people doing in the late summer?
I write letters.
You got that right. So that's a problem.
With our department, with no exception, they're out in March or April, no exception,
Okay.
to try to deal with that problem.
Just to deal with that problem. And give plenty of time so you can harangue them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
after vacation.
So that keep in mind that. Then it's all submitted to the not the DEN's office, the dean's office, and we look at them. Vicki looks at them, and if she sees anything funky, I look at them. Okay, and then we'll alert the department if there's an issue. And
So
then
they
we
get sent straight to you?
what?
They get sent straight to you?
The letters?
Yeah.
No, the dossiers,
Okay.
the completed dossier. We look through them if we see a problem. We ring up, well, that's happened. We got a couple of really bad letters that are just clearly not arm's length. And that's almost always the problem that we pick up.
And what do you do?
Well, as of this year, this next academic year, I've instituted a hard and fast deadline of November 1st for all dossiers, no exceptions, no complaints, no whinings. You don't get it done and those letters are not up to speed on November the 1st, we'll see you next year. And reappointments, the same thing. We've had nothing but trouble over the last fiscal year, academic year.
But let's assume something comes in on October 30th, and you find that 2 of the required letters are not arm's length. What do you then do?
We will alert the department that there's a problem and that in all likelihood, unless they can pull a rabbit out of a box, the person will be delayed in their.
And if it's a tenure decision where there's no more delay allowed, what do you do?
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but you're in deep doo-doo, very deep doo-doo. It's not looking good.
So arm's length is important.
Yeah. Because in the end of the day, that's something the provost looks at, I do know that. And committees really look at. And if it's a slam dunk, it's not so much of a problem. But if it's a little bit of a, then the letters become front and center. Okay, pick those on your list very carefully. Start early, make it long. Need 3, have 6, I'd go to 8. And then, think about international people, although the thing about internationals is they sometimes don't, their systems are different, so you run a risk there. And then lastly, get out and meet some new friends. Networking tips, I like this one. It's called The Cheeky Scientist. 6 networking event tips for quiet introvert PhDs. So, and the tips were good ones, so you might want to have a look at it. That's the end of my prepared remarks. What I thought we'd do now is just sort of discuss, we have 4 people in the room that are in some stage of getting, you're thinking about it, you're working on it, you're a year out or so, okay. So you guys that are working on it, how are you approaching getting these letters?
I emailed all the people, just touching base, saying I'm going up for promotion. Would you be willing to write me a letter? The first time I sent it around, I got 3, and I said, I thought I needed a response soon, so I put that in there. And the second time, when I...
Did you know these people?
Yeah, like they're on committees with me. Well, one was a national committee. One was kind of like you had said, she was a visiting professor. I met with her, and she said she'd write me a letter at the end of the meeting. And so,
Yeah.
that's good. That was an easy one. So I'm like, all right, I'll take you up on that. And then another one, again, another committee, another national committee.
Did you talk to them at the committee meeting?
Yeah, I had met, so those are all people that really every one of them I know personally, in some way, personally. Like they should be able to recognize me.
But just the very fact that you said they should be able to recognize me, that's not a personal relationship at all, right? I mean, I think that's a very good arm's length letter.
The only thing that I would, that I didn't like what I heard was emailing people.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to, I have to choose my terms carefully, strong arm somebody
Yeah.
to do something for me, particularly write a 2-page letter, I kind of call them up on the phone, because it's a little harder for them to back out of that. But email is easy, you just go delete.
Well, the first time around, they all got back to me immediately, saying they'd write a letter.
Oh,
They're
great.
people who, I've been in the committees with, they knew me.
They're reliable.
really close. They're reliable. Then when I heard 8, I said, well, I better get more than just 3 or 4. And so I emailed 6. Well, actually, I might have emailed more than that, 6 to 8. And the 6 that got back to me and said they'd do it, I put on my list. And then the 2 that didn't, even though I knew them and they're nice people, I said, well, I'm not going to
Not gonna bug them.
Don't
bother
bug
them again. So then that was kind of how I approached it.
Now, on your list, what you need to do is put their entire contact information. Name, rank, serial number, address, phone, email, everything. So I had 2 lists.
Okay.
I had one that was national, I had another one that was international, I had at least 6 people on each one.
Mm-hmm.
I ran these lists, so I had these lists made up, and I kept them over years, and it was sort of like fantasy football. If I met somebody new and even better, I'd bump
Yeah.
somebody off and put somebody else on.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of a fun thing to do.
Myself.
Yeah, how are you doing it?
So 3 people will I run into meetings, we kind of go into the meetings, the same meetings all the time, so there are professors. Unfortunately, I don't know anymore, but they're all associates or so similar rank as I am. And then another two are people that are not physicians. There are Ph.D.s in physics, and there are that I have contact with, but they're more of a friends of people that I have worked on a grant with. So I know them through the person that I know very well. So they're not a direct relationship. They kind of,
That's even
people
better.
that we, they don't know me very well.
Yeah.
So that's.
Do you think you're going to run into them in an upcoming meeting?
So chances are I'm going to run into, we all attend the same meeting. And
Yeah,
it
that's
happens
what I
once
thought.
a year, so.
So one good thing to do would be to touch base with each one of them who you've never met before, didn't know that well, and just
Yeah.
chat with them a little bit so that they have a face, name, connection.
Yeah.
And then, thank you so much for having done this. Buy them a beer, whatever it's going to take.
Feels like bribing.
Yeah,
But it's
But-
work. It's work. I mean, I have
It's
written
work.
people letters, and it's,
it's a lot of
you
work.
a
have
lot
to
of
go
work.
over what the chair of the department's list is important to be in the letter. They kind of give you guidelines, so you have to read it. If you really want to put your heart into it, it takes a few hours to do it.
Yeah,
So,
that and more.
and
Mhm.
especially if you don't know the person very well, then you have to study their CV and you have to get an idea of what it is. So let's say my friends would ask me to write a letter for somebody I don't know. That's extra additional hour, just to go on the CV and kind of look
And if
them
their
up.
CV isn't very well put together,
Mhm.
That makes it way harder.
that makes it a whole lot harder.
And
So-
sometimes the CV is not even that great, and the friend really wants the letter, and then how do you, write that?
And so what you end up writing a letter that just basically says what I see in the CV and not
Yeah,
much
that's
more
the
than that.
best you can make out of it.
So there's another good example of where a well-structured, thoughtful, put-together, clear CV does nothing but help you. Now, I thought I'd talk to Ben and Melissa. You're dealing with folks in your departments, respective departments. How are you approaching this with your advisees, consultants, and whatnot?
Approaching what?
Getting letters.
So I'm just starting this process with people in my department, so I haven't even gotten there yet. I just know the amount of work that I put into writing letters myself.
Yeah.
And what helps me a lot when I write a letter is not just to have the CV, but when an institution sends, they have to answer certain questions that's a lot more eloquently than they would on a green sheet, but what their educational mission is and what their focus is, and just a sort of a narrative of what their career has been so far and what their goals are and everything. That really helps me get a sense of the person so that I can put a little bit of a human side to this letter. And that's one of the things that I don't know if we do that here.
Well, that's an interesting point you bring up, because as you know, I'm in the process to try to eliminate green sheets.
Right.
Time out for certain pathways.
For certain pathways at this point in time, and for reappointment, as it turns out. And pathways, in other words, not for tenure, because of that, I'm not going to win that battle anytime soon. But in our CV format, we have you have a good example you can look at, where we have 4 spots where you can begin to put a narrative in there. Then you take those 4
Right.
together as a personal statement. Now, one of the 2 people I have to write a letter for has a personal statement. I did one for Pittsburgh a while back. The guy had a beautiful personal
Yep.
statement.
Yep.
And the Professional Standards Committee, which is the promotion committee at the university, the head of that committee is going to insist on a personal statement for just the reasons you pointed out. I can read through this and get a sense for the person and what they've done and what, once upon a time, long, long ago, they came here and they were supposed to do this, and now I'm doing this, and look at the things. These are the things, when you write these personal statements, these are the things that you really think are important things that you have done. And
I
it
think
helps,
Penn State, I think, has one also.
yeah, most places do.
The green sheets have lots of problems, but
Yep.
right up front, there are two key things. The first is, what are the expectations and how are they known? And the second is a personal statement. I think exactly what you're talking about. And maybe here is where we can get some examples from current green sheets of personal statements from faculty who have recently gone through,
Well, we're hoping in
to
this,
see how they see the.
in this process that we're working on today is that we will generate examples of what they would look like.
Yep.
So what we will insist on people doing is you do your CV, and then you take those 4 sections, and you can jazz it up some more there if you want, and create about a page and a half, no more than 2, of a personal statement outlining what you've done.
Half a page is usually sufficient.
I don't think so. I disagree.
Okay,
The
that's
ones,
fine.
when you're doing an arm's length letter, I don't think a half a page is enough. Because for a lot of these CVs, you can't always get the information. Some of the information that you need is, especially for teaching and clinical science, is not immediately obvious. And you need to present some kind of outcomes that have meaning for that person in their,
But there is a length limitation, and I'll tell you why. It turns out, according to our historian, that the reason the green sheets were brought in was to get people to be more succinct about what they do.
understood, but what I'm saying is the personal statements that helped me the most, that were the ones that they had like 5 questions that they had answers specifically. And the narrative became something that chronologically and it made perfect sense, where they would build to an end, and that
Right.
included outcomes, because that's, I mean, unless you've got, a laundry list of publications, which may be what you need in the basic science, but in clinical sciences and education specifically, that's not enough.
No, I get it.
And that's very often the shortest part of the CV. So we need something else.
Yep, and we'll work towards that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to be perfect the first
Yeah.
time, but we'll get there. And in the Department of Medicine, what are you guys doing about external letters?
Well, I mean, I sit down with the junior faculty, and I basically ask them to come with a list of people they're thinking about asking for letters. And then I go through with them why it was each of the people, what the relationship is. And that's for 2 reasons. One is I really like to try to vet whether something's truly arm's length up front. There's nothing worse than getting a bunch of letters that then end up not being arm's length.
Mhm.
So then, what I try to do is if we have a set of people who look like they'd be good arm's length writers, that's great, but there's never enough. So then the next thing I generally do with people is look at their CV and look for things on the CV that would suggest somebody who might be a target of a request. Whether you've been to committees and you've given talks other places, whether you're on committees, you look for those opportunities. And then, in the absence of that, I generally will talk to the junior faculty about generating those opportunities. So going someplace and giving a talk, or doing those kinds of things, which can be accomplished within the space of 6 months to a year. So as long as people are a little bit cognizant of this up front, you can definitely engineer these kinds of opportunities. I myself, I don't think I ever wrote to anybody to request or to ask if they'd be okay writing a letter, because I was at least under the impression that we weren't allowed to. So, the thought going into that is, I think, even more problematic, because you have to basically, you have to think about, well, who is somebody who's going to know me and write for me, and without any kind of confirmation.
Well, one way to do it the only, just thinking about it, is if your papers get cited, you can look at who's citing your papers.
Well, so who cites, if there was an accompanying editorial, that was one of
Oh,
the
yeah, that's a good idea.
letters I requested.
That's a great idea.
You know, I mean, that doesn't apply, obviously, across the spectrum of people who are going up
No.
for promotion. I mean, that's much more about kind of a tenure type of thing. But, you know, particularly looking at committees people are on, looking at lectures they've given, you know, especially invited ones.
But if you don't get out of town and go
But if you
to,
don't get out of town, you're screwed.
you heard it right here, that's the bottom line.
And that's what I've been telling the people since coming here in my department, you've got to get out of Vermont. People don't leave Vermont.
Yeah,
They're not going anywhere. And they're finally starting to. They're going to national meetings now and
well, they're
presenting.
not gonna get promoted if they don't. I think, well.
I agree.
I won't say they won't get promoted, I'm saying that the difficulties are getting, is going to be really hard.
Mhm.
Well, and I work with the division chiefs on this sometimes, because, you know, one of the things you get is division chiefs in medicine saying, well, I really want to support this person going up. And I say, well, you know, rather than, you know, finding people for them, or rather than agitating within the department, what would really be helpful is for you to figure out with the faculty member a concrete plan for some time in order to travel. And I've had that conversation with several division chiefs, you know, along those exact lines, because people always say, well, I don't have any time to travel, and I, you know, often that's not really true, that's just a perception. But then there are certainly instances where that is true, that clinical obligations really keep people from being able to do that. And if that's what you need to get promoted, then that needs to be a priority, not only for the faculty member, but for the division chief, the department chair.
And the same thing applies to the people on the teaching track.
Absolutely.
Who, you know,
Oh, I think this would
I've
be
had a
across
number
the
of them
board.
say to me that, well, I can't, you know, well, when's your next meeting? Well, it's when I'm teaching, whatever it is. I said, well, you're gonna have to figure out some way to do it. You're only gonna be gone a few days. Maybe somebody can cover for you, rearrange
Your
the schedule.
chair or your clinical person will let you.
Right.
So this is an interesting question that is also underneath here. Is the national, international reputation appropriate? That's what it is now.
That's the way the rules are written now.
That's not the question.
I know.
The question is, what is
was
appropriate
trying
for
to
some
die.
of these people? And I don't know the answer to that.
I think to continue getting promoted and being considered, you have to have a national
You have to
reputation.
be
People
known.
have to know who you are and what you're doing for a reason.
Well, I certainly, I violently agree for the title of professor. You're a professor, not a super clinician, you're not a super teacher, you're a professor. And a professor, in my mind, means something, okay? Maybe it's a little old school, but you're sitting there with your pipe and your feet up on the desk kind of a thing, but people
Yeah,
know
don't
you.
say that, 'cause that's what they think over at the hospital.
Is that what they
Yeah,
think?
they think we're sitting around with our feet on our desk.
No, but
Don't say that.
from the institutional's
Right.
point of view, every time you go out on the road and give a talk, you're bringing credit
You
to
betcha.
our institution. And as an institutional official, or ex-institutional official, from that point of view,
Mhm.
it is imperative that our faculty get it, because there's nothing but good things that come out.
Absolutely. And you should be, if you have junior people, you should be taking them along. I took
Yep.
2 of my junior faculty members to our national education meeting recently. One of them presented a poster and the other one presented a workshop. UVM has now got a name out there where they've never had it before, never.
And that's why it's so,
Well, I think that speaks to the role of mentor in the process as well, 'cause I think, you know. in
And department
particular-
support,
And department support.
100%.
And again, I would say in many regards comes back to the mentor in that regard as well, because I think somebody needs to be able to negotiate with
Mhm.
the department or the division chief. Junior faculty in particular have a hard time navigating that.
Yeah. And advocating for themselves.
And advocating
Agreed.
for themselves.
Right.
And so, you know, one of the primary responsibilities in my mind of a mentor in the system is to help the mentee navigate the promotions process. And a huge part of that is making sure that they have the opportunities to gain reputation
Mhm.
and to help them identify, you know, appropriate people for writing letters and things like that. Because as a junior person, you just don't have that in your head. It's
Yeah.
not something you're familiar with, which is another reason why you should never have assistant professors writing promotion letters, is they don't understand the process as well. And so, I think that mentorship is really critical in this.
Well, what would you do, let's say that you're in a subspecialty of medicine or maybe even science, where you're just one-off, you're just this one person doing this one thing. How do you
You
expect
go
to get
out,
this
you
many?
go out to national meetings and you start buddying up with people. You've got to get that mentorship outside the institution.
You gotta get people to recognize what you do. I mean, it's an uphill climb if you really are, that unique. But, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago, they'd burn you at the stake, so I guess it's better now, you still have trouble getting promoted. Right, 400 years ago.
Not sure why that came into your mind, but. that's
Well, no,
okay.
I mean, and you think about people who are really pushing the margins or having, developing an entirely new field, and certainly they exist here. That's just a very hard place to be, especially
Well,
as a junior.
what I was hoping you'd say is identify somebody who could be that mentor, even though they're not in here located on site.
Sure.
They could be somewhere else. I mean, it's, with Skype and email, it used to be a hard time to phone Australia. I mean, it was horrible trying to have a conversation. Now it sounds like they're right here in the room. So there's, between that and Skype and email, there's no excuse for not. You could find somebody outside the institution that could help you navigate through this. And keep in mind that today, in our system, mentoring faculty and mentoring people in general counts for them too. So,
I have a question relating to the difficulty with the letters. Is this difficulty due to lack of clarity with regard to the request? Are these problems coming up in spite of the letter we send requesting these arm's length letters, or because of the letter we send? You see what I'm saying? Are we asking the right question to filter out the non-arm's length letter?
well, that was the notion behind this.
Yeah.
Was to, let the person writing the letter know that, if they have certain kinds of relationships with the candidate, that could be problematic. And then, how do they know the person? So we have some gauge of, is it a little tighter relationship, or is it truly like, I've never met the person in my life? So that was the
That
point.
should help.
That should help.
A substantial portion of the time, when we get these covers back, if they're completed, because
If.
they're not always completed.
No, they're not always.
But people will often self-identify as not being arm's length.
Yeah.
And yet the letters sometimes will come forward as being arm's length, despite the fact that the cover sheet shows
Yeah.
they're not. I mean, it's a problem.
So you can ask them, did you understand this, and fill it in wrong? I mean, it's easy, just go chick, and sign, so it's not a big deal. But, anything's a big deal when you're having to spend all this time. So the hour is just about done. I hope you understand, those out in our viewing audience and people here, that the arm's length letters are really an important part of the promotion package. They're an important part for a lot of other reasons too. I mean, I've used my list of writers to write other letters that I need for professional advancement, not just promotion. So it's an important activity. It's a little tricky. I think Dr. Surratt caught it right. You've got to start early, because if you do it,
He starts earlier than
Yeah.
I think anybody
Yeah.
I've heard of, which is a good thing.
it's a very good thing. Because this is one of the top problems we see in academic advancement. And it's not just us that are having this problem.
The other thing to do is to keep an eye on people that you think may be able to help you someday, because they'll get promoted and all of a sudden somebody that was once an assistant professor is now a professor. And so those people, if you keep track of their career, you can actually find new people that maybe were not available to you before,
Right, because they've now been promoted.
because they're promoted.
Particularly when you have to go up for the next, all right?
I want to know if you guys have any questions.
Well, I was going to say, is there any question? Pretty clear?
Maybe my letter request went out, I'm not sure, but I provided the names. It's a little bit of a learning process for me. I certainly appreciate all that you guys have taught me.
Well, for some of us, we learn what happens when it doesn't work out so well. Because both Dr. Lowe and I were not promoted the first time around. And so that's
And
a
the
way.
real crime is when somebody is really good and it doesn't show through the letters, or it doesn't show
Yeah.
through the CV. That's
That's the cry.
not a good thing.
You okay?
Yeah,
Got it?
Me.
All right, good.
no, thanks.
All right, well, thank you for coming, everybody. Good luck.
Thank you.
And we'll meet again next month, and we'll go back at CVs again. Take another run at it.